Hello, all. This is Cinematic Breakdown, and I will be your omnipotent voice for the evening. Today, I want to talk about story structure, or, more specifically, the idea commonly referred to as trimming the fat. For those of you who don't know, this is the concept that anything and everything that could possibly be removed from the film, any moment, detail, expression, bit, or even a single frame, that if pulled out will not crumble the rest of the film around it, obviously needs to be cut. Now, while it's obvious that anything that holds back the film should be yanked, I think the idea that if the film will still function without it, then that qualifies as proof that it should be cut, is just plain ridiculous. Simply because cutting something won't leave a gaping hole doesn't mean it doesn't add to the work in a positive way. And sadly, this is a mindset that many editors and directors have, and what's worse to me, is taught to every person looking to learn about editing like it's scripture. However, while it may have no effect on the overall plot, the emotional arc, beyond simply that of the characters, but that of the audience, must be taken into account. Lots of excellent moments in many of the greatest films could have been completely eliminated and no one would have thought anything was missing. Possibly the most famous example of this would be the music scene in The Shawshank Redemption. In this scene, an inmate gets access to a record player as well as the main office and decides to blast music over the loudspeakers to the other inmates. This works well for a few minutes until the guards manage to get in and put an end to the music, toss the inmate in solitary, and that's the end of that. Quite literally. Once he gets out, his friends crack a few jokes, and then the whole thing is over and it's never mentioned again, not even once. Doesn't come up, it has nothing to do with anything in any way, shape, or form. Plot, character, other characters, background plot, nothing. It's like it never happened. If this scene were removed, not a single person would notice anything missing. Nothing would have to be rewritten to fill in the gap, and everything would flow perfectly. However, the scene is a beautiful moment that clearly has an impact on the film as a whole. This impact is not on the plot or even on the characters themselves. Although it does act to rehumanize them, it's really not all that necessary because the entire story acts as a humanizing agent in and of itself. One more moment doesn't really matter. However, for us, the audience, the moment stands out as one of the more memorable scenes. In a film of this caliber, with so many long-remembered quotes, moments, scenes, and characters, what is it about this specific moment of silence and peace that resonates so much? I don't know, but it matters. Not all examples of this are so large and memorable. One fine example of a small moment that nearly every editor would have cut is a few frames from Taxi Driver by Martin Scorsese. The moment I'm talking about is when the main character, Travis Bickle, drops a tablet into his water before drinking it. As you can see, this shot holds much longer than you'd expect it to.
Well, I'm gonna go do my dirt. Travis.
The overwhelming majority of editors would have left the moment like this.
If you ever need one, I know a fella can get you a real nice deal. Lots of shit around.
I never use mine. I'm conservative, you know? But it's a good thing to have just as a threat.
Travis. Look. Piece of Errol Flynn's.
However, Scorsese himself said, I never actually got the quote to put in this sentence, but it was something along the lines of, no, let it play. And they did. If you cut the length of time you spend staring at the fizzing water, it flows much more naturally and no one would ever question whether or not something was missing. Nothing appears to have been cut or left out, and obviously the film functions perfectly without it. However, what you don't know you're missing is very much something of importance. Holding on to water so much longer than normal creates a sensation of anxiety and impending trouble. You don't know what's brewing, but you know it's bad and you know it's coming. This spike in tension is part of the overall tone and atmosphere of the film. Without it, it functions just fine. But like I said, you don't know what you're missing, and in that moment of silence is a world of depth. Films are one of those things that are more than the sum of their parts. Picking an individual moment or aspect of a movie and saying that it's not needed because a film is still a film without it, it's like taking the tomato out of a sandwich and saying it's still a sandwich and it functions perfectly in every way a sandwich should. Well, guess what? Who cares? Now, if you don't like tomatoes, or you have some other reason to go and remove it, fine, go ahead. But to pretend that just because it's still a sandwich without the tomato means that you have to take it out or you don't know how to make a sandwich is just fucking dumb. And just like that, Without this moment, the film would continue on without interruption of any kind. But, to do more of that repeating myself thing I do so much, when not a single person would ever suspect that something had been cut, and the flow would carry on without notice, the overall emotional arc of the film would not be the same. Sure, no audience member alive would ever think, that was a good film. But if they had just held the shot of the tablet dissolving in the glass for a few more seconds, then it would have been fantastic. But that says nothing about what its presence does and what it brings to the table. According to every definition of trim the fat out there, this bit should not be in the film. It should be cut because it's unnecessary and therefore holding the film back. But a question I so rarely hear asked is, why? Not why does this do nothing for the film, but why is this notion of get everything that can possibly be gotten the fuck out of there, so overwhelmingly held as the banner cry of the movie-making world? Well, the reason has nothing to do with quality.
What?
The reason is because shorter movies get you out of the theater faster. If a film is 2 hours long, it can be shown 5 times in a 10-hour period. But realistically only 4 because of the time needed between viewing. However, trim that 2-hour production down to only 1.5 hours, and suddenly you get a whole extra viewing in there. And one extra viewing per 10-hour period per theater can add up to a massive increase in profits. And this is why production companies harangue the editors to trim every single frame out of a movie. Not because they think it will make a better movie, but because the shorter it is, the more they can show it. And over time, with new filmmakers studying the works of the past and what they grew up with, these cut-down, over-trimmed films became the standard they held themselves to. It's gotten to the point where it's basically part of the fabric of the system. It's just naturally in there now, and artists are yelling at other artists to maintain the standard without any provocation from studios at all. It's totally self-imposed. And yes, a well-trimmed, zero-fat movie is fully capable of being excellent. Many great movies are the very essence of this. But it just bothers me that so many people seem to think that this is the only way to make a movie. That you either trim all the fat out of there, or you don't know what you're doing. That fat is a sure sign of amateurism, and that no one in their right mind could possibly want a moment like that in their movie. And the fact of the matter is, for every well-trimmed, zero-fat masterpiece out there, there's 50 that just feel like edit by numbers. I can practically see the grid lines saying, cut here, paste there, show up late, leave early, start here, end there. It's cookie-cutter movie making, and it's boring. It's just plain boring. I can't even begin to explain how many movies I've seen that really, really should have been good, but they fell victim to this cookie-cutter by-the-numbers plague. One example, the most recent example, because I just saw it again very recently, so it's in my head, is the movie Big Eyes, which was directed by Tim Burton and written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, which I already know I'm pronouncing horribly, so I'm just going to throw it up on the screen like usual. Ta-da, there's the name, applause, 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 and bring it down, carry on. Now when I saw the previews for this, I really was legitimately so excited. I was looking forward to this with so much anticipation. It looked great, the story sounded interesting, and then when I saw it, I was left, well, I don't know. For the most part, nothing about it was bad. The acting was great, the cinematography was good, the story works, the characters are interesting. Everything about it works. It follows all the rules, specifically the main 2, which are really the same one. Trim the fat, the writing version of which is show up late, leave early. Show up at a scene or right before the part that matters happens, and then get out of there right as it's finishing. Upon watching it multiple times, I was questioning, why don't I like this movie? I really feel like I should. The fact of the matter is that everything about this movie interests me. But then it clicked. It's paint by numbers. There's no fat here whatsoever. But the fat, to continue my food analogy, is where the flavor comes from. A well-marbled steak has fat. And then I watched it again, and it all became so clear. Every single scene starts off with a singular purpose. Anything unrelated to that purpose has been long removed. This is the scene where she leaves her husband. This is the scene where she looks for work. This is the scene where she meets a new guy. This is the scene where... And that's how the whole movie goes. Nothing unfolds organically. Nothing breathes. Everything was predetermined in advance, and now we're just being shown a list of bullet points in the form of a film. Go and watch it. The moment any scene starts, you already know how it's going to end. Nothing is shocking, nothing is surprising, nothing is alive. Maybe if they had allowed individual scenes to contain multiple functions, or left some fat in there to melt into the overall work, then it may have left a better taste in our mouths. But instead of characters that think and make decisions, and a plot that follows them as they move through life, we get a story that takes one step at a time through the minimum required number of plot points to constitute a feature film, and characters who show up, perform their function, and then wait to see what the next bullet point tells them to do. To reiterate what I've been blabbing about, have your own opinion. If you think something is bad or boring or holding the film back in any way, yank it the hell out of there. There's many, many moments in many, many movies that absolutely have no business being there and should be cut. But if you're going to cut something, cut it because you want to, not because the movie won't suddenly stop functioning if that piece of the puzzle is pulled. Good characters make decisions. They have minds that think. And more than that, they breathe. They react. They sing and dance even if they only walk and talk. And while showing up late and leaving early may let you get all you need, it doesn't give you the full picture. Don't blindly trim all fat. Choose how much fat you want and where you want it. If a work is attempting some level of artistry, it needs these moments. It's alive. It needs to breathe, and it's these moments that give it air.
The colossal prick even managed to sound magnanimous.
And just like that, fuck! Who fucked my mother? Hello? Oh, it is not an urgent announcement. Oh, die in a fire, and then come back and fucking die in another fire. More fire. All problems can be solved with fire. This is one of them. Where the fuck was I? Yes. And just like that, why am I so far from the microphone? I should be eating the microphone. I should be eating the microphone. I took a joke too far, and now there's hair in my mouth. It just bothers me that so many people seem to think that... Wait, what? Oh shit, you fucking moron. Did you read... What the fuck? What? What? Oh, you fucking idiot. Seriously, well, fucking... Alright. Just make this shit up then, I guess. Fuck. Let's just see. I can rant. And yes. What's the next? What am I going into here? And for every well-trimmed 05 masterpiece out there, there's 50 that... Yeah, okay, I remember this. Nothing about it was bad. Nothing. Not one thing was bad. I mean, there was some bad, actually. That's not true. The narration was awful. They should have never had any of it. If they just pulled the narration out, it would have been a much better movie. And then there's one or two plot points I take issue with, but that's more me as nitpicking as a writer than like a legitimate movie flaw. However, shit. I went on a tangent. Nothing about it was bad. The acting was great. The cinematography was good. The story works. Shit, I can't say nothing about it was bad with an honest face. For the most part, nothing about it was bad.